Some people have called it a rant. Others have described my YouTube episodes on the coronavirus as being dyslexic, whilst others have liked some of the thoughts I've included and shared with you all. Whether you consider my episodes as rants, as being dyslexic, or as being useful, helpful, and even amusing, welcome to Arm Wrestling with COVID-19 in London. This is the latest, number 19. I just want to highlight a few observations or a few points that caught my eye today. There might be no causal connection between them, but they're all part and parcel of the challenges we're all facing across the world, and certainly here in London with this new coronavirus. The first one is about social distancing. Now, you know that's a bugbear of mine because I refuse to call it social distancing. I stick with physical distancing. If we really didn't want to have any social interaction and wanted social distancing, we wouldn't have all those web chats, online chats about what we're wearing, what we're cooking, where we're going, what we think, what we did. No, we're doing all that in abundance. At least most of us are. What we're avoiding, and still are, despite the changing rules and the changing guidance, we're avoiding physical distancing. And you can see that when walking down the high street, whether to go to a pharmacy or to go to a grocery shop or a supermarket, or just having your daily constitutional in the park or somewhere in your neighborhood. A lot of people just are walking, ignoring your presence. Probably even, if you've noticed, a lot of them walk whilst reading their messages or whatever on their mobiles. But there are some people who look at you coming their way, and they're coming in the opposite direction. And suddenly, in order to avoid you, because you might be a dangerous person, they suddenly swerve to the end of that pavement or that pathway in order to avoid you. I understand fully what they're doing, but I still find that swerve, which is so self-conscious and so obvious, quite an interesting action, particularly by those who also have their gloves and masks on. But that's fine, to each his or her own. For me, what matters in this little tiny observation is not whether they swerve right or they swerve left, but whether they are comfortable in their own skins. It's physical distancing, not social distancing for me. The other thing I also learned, and I love these little nuggets, is an acronym called FOMO, F-O-M-O. Now, a lot of people watching this tube might say, Harry, please, step into the 21st century. Don't you know what FOMO is? I'm afraid I didn't. FOMO, ladies and gentlemen, stands for fear of missing out. And that means, basically in a nutshell, that some people were analyzing on a radio program the other day that before the new coronavirus hit us all and pretty much paralyzed our lives, we were so keen, so intense to live every experience, not to miss out on anything, to do everything and anything that life threw at us, social activity, whatever, that now suddenly, with the lockdowns, with the fact that we are handicapped in a sense and we cannot do everything we wanted to do, a lot of people are missing out on a lot of things. Hence, FOMO, fear of missing out, is being challenged, apparently, according to the couple of anthropologists who were discussing this on the program. We are, at the moment, challenging the concept of FOMO. Just thought I'll mention it to you. You might find it amusing, you might find it helpful, or, God forfend, you might find it dyslexic and a rant. The other thing I wanted to also say is that, again, part of my own learning curve, And you know by now, I keep saying this mantra like that I'm a technophobe. I mean, I was quite proud until coronavirus hit us that I used to Skype with friends. And sometimes I used to also Zoom with a couple of close friends. But now, look at this. We have Skype, we have Zoom. Harry has also discovered the technological intricacies of WebEx, Microsoft Teams. And now on top of it all is the free service offered by Google, which is the Meet service. We are spoiled. All of them are coming and saying, please use us. Please use our apps or our services. Why? Well, competition is part of it, I suppose, but also, and forgive my cynicism, put it down to my legal education, put it down to my own character, perhaps, because they want to know more about us. And the more we use their apps and their services, the more we express ourselves when we chat online, when we write something, when we say something, they get to know more about us. So they get to know what we like and what we dislike. And that, to put it mildly, is good for marketing purposes if, God forbid, for anything more serious than that. So that is that. And then that's my thought on that. I told you, just thoughts. The other thing I would say is that recently I've also discovered that COVID-19 does affect a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of young kids under the age of 5, probably, who are now suffering as a consequence of COVID-19 with something called the Kawasaki disease. What is the Kawasaki disease? I did some research. I like medicine. I read a lot about medicine, and my family is not a legal family, they're more a medical family. Kawasaki disease is like vasculitis, it's like the inflammation of the arteries, and basically causes a lot of serious complications with those young kids, which could also result in aneurysms and could, again, perish the thought, cause more fatalities. So some such cases have been reported. They were initially reported in Italy. There are quite a few of them being reported in the United States. And now we have some of those cases in the UK. Our epidemiologists and our pediatricians are saying that this is very limited. This is nothing to worry about, and I trust them. But it is always good to know so that when parents have kids exhibiting symptoms like high fever, swollen glands around the neck, a little bit like glandular fever, I suppose, and other conditions, rashes, etc., they take action because those kids are our future, basically. I'm not the future, they are, I'm the past. So Kawasaki disease is something else that I learned about. And finally, and I'm looking at a piece of paper there where I had all those points, and I see that I pretty much covered them all, except to finally just share a personal thought with you. In a coffee conversation, another coffee conversation I had only yesterday, somebody was telling me, Harry, you've always been quite open-minded about life and death issues. That given your underlying conditions, the fact that you basically skirted death on the operating table some 10 years ago, that you sort of look at life and death in different ways. So why are you so worried about COVID-19? The observation was correct. I'm not sure that the conclusion followed as eloquently as I would have thought. Why? Yes, I have had life and death issues, and I have had physical and medical issues. My GP, my registrar or consultant also knows about that fully. And for that, again, I say I'm very grateful to our NHS, not only in words, not only in going and clapping every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. as if that is in itself going to help the NHS. That is only a small, small sign of gratitude. But by basically defending the NHS and campaigning for the NHS to have the resources it needs in order to do the job it does so well without all those resources. But back to my point. Yes, I have dabbled with life and death issues in the past. And the reason why COVID-19 worries me is that it is not the death itself. It is the journey toward that end, the suffering. You know, the stories I hear, I was watching a couple of programs on the telly the other day about people who are intubated, how it basically affects your voice box, the trachea, how people are now trying to avoid that in the ICU by going through the nose or by giving anti-clotting drugs so that you do not have clots in your lungs, etc., etc. It's the suffering that worries me. And if you reach that stage, then it is a hell of a ride. And the recovery, if you're lucky to come out the other side, is even more difficult. That is what worries me. I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to go into any morbid analysis because this is not the venue, this is not the place for it. But I just wanted to share this thought with you. In law, we call it something like causation. And that is basically what worries me. And that is what makes me extra careful when some of my friends, full of bravado, say, oh, it's not going to happen to us. Why isn't it going to happen to us? I am ethnically part of that famous, another acronym, BAME fold, but also I'm of that age where I'm more susceptible. And to be honest with you, I do not fancy the idea of suffering and going through all those difficult moments again. So on that note, I wish you all to be well. I implore that you keep safe. And from this ranting, dyslexic, helpful, unhelpful friend who intrudes into your cyber life every few days and who sometimes risks losing his voice as well, I wish you well and I wish you a good week ahead.